good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really thrilled and honored to have with me as my guest, Greg Raiten, who's the co-founder of TechGC. Greg, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Richard. Great to be here.
So, Greg, actually, let me start by asking, you have a super interesting background. How does somebody who has a degree from Johns Hopkins in computer science decide to go to law school?
It's a good question. I ask myself that sometimes too. I was never someone who really wanted to be a lawyer. It was something that it was kind of always in the back of my mind as kind of this catch-all, and I might be interested in it. But I did think a lot about getting an MBA or maybe even getting a master's in computer science, and ultimately decided that law kind of scratched a few itches, and it allowed you to be more on the business side. In a lot of ways, I do think law is kind of similar to an engineering thought process in terms of, at least on the transactional side, drafting contracts and whatnot. So that was kind of interesting, and ultimately ended up taking the LSAT and just decided to go to law school and hoping one day I would make it back to the business world.
Any particular things in your engineering world that kind of got the seed even planted in about law school?
So the startup world. So I during my undergrad, I tried to start a couple companies. Entered a business plan competition, got fairly far with one of them, but it didn't ultimately ever go anywhere. And then other small projects. So I got pretty interested in that. And then after college, I joined a startup that was started by one of my professors. And I was in kind of a hybrid business programming role. And one of the things I thought was really interesting was we were working with the company's outside counsel on a number of contracts, as well as this guy was pretty interesting. He had helped kind of craft some of the startup legislation in Maryland to make it a more startup friendly environment and whatnot. And I kind of enjoyed working with him on some of those things. And it did help me think a little bit more of oh, this is actually pretty interesting. He is a real strategic kind of business lead, advisor for us. And that's really valuable. So I thought I could really work with startups and I could really enjoy doing that. So that was very much my goal going into law school, was to be a startup lawyer.
Well, and of course, that's exactly what you did, right? You became a startup lawyer after law school.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit so how did you make that transition from, being a startup lawyer to now it sounds like you're actually a real entrepreneur. Tell me a little bit how that transition happened.
Yeah, it was something I think I get to talk to a lot of people at this point, and sort of fortunate to, maybe talk to people about their careers and give my perspective. And I've talked to so many lawyers that want to ultimately make it to the business side.
Yeah.
And that was me. I mean, I really did think about that at some point, and I didn't necessarily know what that meant or what I wanted out of that. But I have always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just didn't know if I could ever, really do it. But it was something that was always in the back of my mind. So this came about really organically. TechGC was something that Kieran and I started as a side project. I went to a law firm for a number of years. I worked at a couple of different law firms, and then went in-house to the venture fund side and was the general counsel and COO of a couple of venture funds. And we really started this community as a community for ourselves. It was very much, based on the idea that being a GC is really hard, and you're sort of faced with all sorts of questions that you don't necessarily know the answer to. I think general counsels and maybe CFOs are similar in this way, in that almost everything comes across your desk. Legal and finance, sort of have to weigh in on almost everything. And lawyers are interesting in that most of us come from a law firm background. You're pretty siloed, right? I was a corporate lawyer. I did venture and I did general corporate stuff. I did not know employment. I did not know IP. I did not know tax. Frankly, I didn't know fund formation. And suddenly you're thrown into this GC seat, and you need to know something about all of those things, at least to some extent. And it's a learning curve. And I think when you're on the beginning of that learning curve, it's really, really valuable to have a set of peers to talk to, because some of this is things you need outside counsel's help on, but a lot of it is just navigating internal companies and how do you give better advice? How do you guys handle these issues? I'm getting this from my outside counsel. What do you do with that type of advice? And that was the impetus for forming TechGC, and that just turned into a business. It wasn't something we set out to create that.
Interesting. So at what point, what was the tipping point that turned it from just a side project to then like, oh wow, this is going to actually be a full-time business?
Yeah, it really it sort of came about organically in that the community. Well, both Karen and I very much felt like if I was going to put my time and my name on this, that it needed to be high quality. So we kind of started doing events and whatnot as a side project, but we put a lot of time into this to make sure that we did a first conference, and the conference was at my offices at Firstmark, the fund I was at the time, and like it was like my name was attached to it, like it needed to be good, and at some point like it just continued to grow to the point where like it was too much to continue doing as a side project. Like we couldn't keep up with the scale that it was getting to on the side. So we had a number of inflection points where, we discussed this, like we either scale it back a little bit and we just keep going on the side, or, we jump in with both feet, or we really started in the middle ground where we hire some people, we start sort of like augmenting ourselves to handle some of this work. And that just kept, sort of like you keep hitting these ceilings, and like that's no longer a solution.
Yeah.
So in 2018, we started charging membership fees and started to realize that, there was a business model on that side. We also had been charging sponsorship fees since day one. So we sort of had two different revenue sources, continued to grow that for a bit. And then Kieran's company got acquired, and he really had this opportunity now where, he could either think about going back to a law firm or another startup, or he could try to do this full time. So he decided to do that in sort of mid 2018. And then I jumped on board in mid 2019, little under a year later. And it was just driven by what we saw as a pretty interesting opportunity to grow something here, and not just have it be the side project that it was. And, it was a bit of a risk, but, every startup is. And I think we were probably a little more fortunate than most startups in that we really had a business model before we actually jumped in full time.
Well, what would you say? I mean, how would you describe kind of the unique mission or what Tech GC brings? I mean, obviously it's a network of in-house counsel, but it's obviously something I assume, more specific than that. How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, our mission is to help people excel in their day-to-day jobs and succeed throughout their careers. So we really think about that as two pieces. Like the core thing we are doing is this is a community of general counsel and CLOs, and we are trying to help you be better general counsel and CLOs. How do we help you continue to grow in that role, continue to sort of like manage all of the challenges you face on a day-to-day basis, and then ultimately how do we help you succeed throughout your career, whether that means jumping from a private company to a public company, or leading your company through an IPO, or expanding into business development or corporate development, or being a CEO or a founder. That is ultimately what our value prop is. What we've learned over the years is that, a number of years ago, we learned that what we were trying to solve here is not a GC problem. It is really a C-suite problem. And, the idea being that when you are a C-suite executive, you're the single person in charge of your function, and all of your colleagues in the C-suite are looking to you for answers, whether that's finance or marketing or, or growth. And these people are kind of like little islands of one, right? Like, who do you turn to when you need to ask questions? And everyone's looking to you internally. So creating these communities of C-suite is really how we think about the future of this. So about 2 years ago, we rebranded the company as the Suite, and we launched a CFO community called the F-Suite. And similar model, same model for CFOs, and that community has been growing nicely. And we'll continue to do that for other C-suite executives.
Oh, interesting. Nothing announced yet. You haven't decided what's the next C-suite that you're gonna.
Yeah, nothing announced yet. We are going to soft launch one in Q4, and we will be announcing that shortly.
Okay, interesting. So how big is the membership now? Or can you talk about kind of roughly how big Tech GC is now?
Yeah, Tech GC is about, so we have about 2,400 members in Tech GC, and about 1,700 members in Deputy GC, which is the community for direct reports and senior in-house counsel below the GC. So yeah, just a little over 4,000 members in total.
So what do you feel like this endeavor now? Do you feel like it's scratching the entrepreneurial itch? Tell me a little bit why it's different. Do you miss practicing law? Because I assume you're not doing that anymore. How does it feel running this business?
Yeah, good question. It is so I do not miss practicing law. Um, I was never one. I never wanted to stay at a law firm. I knew that very clearly. It was more a matter of I wanted to go in house. When's the right time? What's the right opportunity? And then even being in house, like I probably had what I would consider to be my dream in-house general counsel role, but I wasn't. Like, there was a part of me that just felt like I was missing out on other stuff that I really wanted to do and was passionate about. Like it wasn't. I didn't have that level of like creativity and sort of like like building something that I really felt like I was missing. So this, 100% scratches that itch. I think the company is growing quite a bit. I think a lot of people sometimes think about Tech GC as being more of a nonprofit sort of bar association type organization. It has never been that. That was never what it was at the start. It's certainly not what it is now. It really is a family of executive communities that we're building. We've got a really strong revenue model. We have a strong set of business initiatives. In addition to the community that we're building, which is really event-based and education, learning-based, networking. We also built a custom member platform. So we have a full tech team. We have an engineering team. We have a product team. We're really thinking about what the future of community should be, professional communities. And obviously, like LinkedIn is probably the big name that people think about when you think about a professional networking platform. LinkedIn's fantastic. I think it's a great product, but it doesn't really solve the need that I think we're trying to solve, which is being that place where you go to, where you're looking to turn, where you're looking to get questions answered in your seat.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, we're building out the whole product of that, and thinking about all the things that normal software companies are thinking about.
Yeah. Interesting. So, I mean, obviously you've got a lot of people now, employees working on the program. What do you personally like? What are you focused on in terms of what you're trying to do at Tech GC?
I'd say what I'm personally most passionate about is the product side. I really enjoy building this product, and sort of, I like design. I like thinking about solving, how can we build a tool that solves problems for our members, and probably in some ways back to my computer science days. And one of the things I actually really enjoyed about being a programmer was you kind of like, you take a problem and you create a solution for it, and then it like does something afterwards, right? Like, so I enjoy that part of it. I obviously like have my hands in most things that we do here. Kira and I kind of divide up the company a little bit, but really, really enjoy the community aspect. Like, sometimes sounds cheesy, but I think the value we're able to unlock for members, and hearing them tell us that, and sort of like understand how we were able to play a small part in that is really satisfying. I've been there myself. I know how valuable it is. Someone like introduces you to some other person and you have a conversation, and it like unlocks this whole problem you were trying to solve. Like, that's powerful.
Interesting. Do you ever reflect on how you've stumbled into something, and I use the word stumbled, into something that kind of marries, all your different interests, being a computer programmer, being a lawyer, being an entrepreneur? I mean, there aren't many people that can get all that combined into one job.
It's true. It has definitely crossed my mind. I feel pretty lucky about it. And, I think stumbled in is the right word. Like this, we got very lucky, and, a lot of this was able to just create a business model out of something we were passionate about anyway.
Well, what are the other future plans? You mentioned you're going to build out various C-suites. I assume you'll continue that. Anything else even kind of beyond that? What is the 10 and 20-year plan for this company?
We really see like our longer term vision is becoming the community fabric for the tech ecosystem, right? So like we think about, like there is the Slack is the business communication tool. LinkedIn is probably like the business platform where people are now talking about work issues, and it's become a great content channel and a recruiting channel. We think about like, what is that community fabric? Where do professional executives connect and find professional value in, a peer community? And if we can sort of create that, we're starting at the C-suite level. We see that as being, sort of the place where you can start and continue to create value for people on the C-suite team. But our whole sort of approach to community building is connecting you with your closest peers. So closest peers, I think, can mean a lot of different things for different questions. Even in our legal community, we see sometimes you have a question that's really industry based and you want to talk to other people in your industry. Sometimes it's based on the size of company you're at. You want to talk to a similar size company or a similar level of experience. So there's that level of granularity, but at the highest level, it's trying to connect people that are at similar places in their career and similar levels of responsibility. Mm-hmm. That's something I think we can replicate, across the professional space.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I really appreciate your taking the time. I've known Kieran for a super long time, and it's great to hear the story, the inside story about how you started Tech GC and where it's going, and really appreciate your telling me all about it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard. Appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
This is Richard Hsu and Greg Raiten. Thanks.